The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. As Jesus came down from the mountain with Peter, James, John, and approached the other disciples, they saw a large crowd around them, and scribes arguing with them. Immediately on seeing him, the whole crowd was utterly amazed. They ran up to him and greeted him. He asked them, "What are you arguing about with them?" Someone from the crowd answered him, "Teacher, I have brought to you my son, who is possessed by a mute spirit. Wherever it seizes him, it throws him down. He foams at the mouth and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive it out, but they were unable to do so." Jesus said to them in reply, "O faithless generation, how long will I be with you? How long will I endure you? Bring him to me." They brought the boy to him, and when he saw him, the spirit immediately threw the boy into convulsions. As he fell to the ground, he began to roll around and foam at the mouth. Then Jesus questioned his father, "How long has this been happening to him?" He replied, "Since childhood, and has often thrown him into the fire and into the water to kill him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us." Jesus said to him, "If you can, everything is possible to one who has faith." Then the boy's father cried out, "I do believe, help my unbelief." Jesus, on seeing a crowd rapidly gathering, rebuked the unclean spirit and said to it, "Mute and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." Shouting and throwing the boy into convulsions, it came out. He became like a corpse, which caused many to say, "He is dead." But Jesus took him by the hand, raised him, and he stood up. When Jesus entered the house, his disciples asked him in private, "Why could we not drive the spirit out?" He said to them, "This kind can only come out through prayer." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
The event that we just heard and pictured in our imagination as we were hearing it can be best understood if we look at what came before and what comes after. What we heard on Saturday and what we will hear tomorrow here in Mark's Gospel. What did we hear on Saturday? You may remember that was the event of the Transfiguration. Jesus not only appearing in glory, but Jesus, in the presence of the leaders of his disciples, Peter, James, and John, is affirmed by God the Father. "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." But the important thing of that whole event is what God the Father then says to them. "Listen to him." And once those words were spoken, Jesus is returned to his normal appearance and comes down the mountain with them. And what's the first thing that happens? The event that we just heard. This boy who, since his earliest days, had been oppressed and even in the control of a demonic spirit. And that spirit tries to destroy him. It's interesting the words that are used. Throws him into the fire and into the water. And nothing seems to be able to help him. Even Jesus' apostles. Even those who had been in the presence of Jesus and knew and in some ways understood how he was working, they were powerless. Human effort, in other words, was powerless. And so what does Jesus do? He first asks for faith. He first says, everything is possible to the one who has faith. And I can't help but think that the Father said sort of, uh-oh. Yeah, I have faith, but it's weak. There's much of it. There's not much of it. I believe in God, okay, as long as everything is going okay. As long as everything's going the way I think it should, I've got faith. God is there. You know, that old saying, God's in his heaven, all's right with the world. Well, we know both parts of that are false. God's not in his heaven. God's right here. Why? Because not all is right with the world. All we have to do is look outside. But even more importantly, all we have to do is look at our own hearts. And we see there's a lot there that we have not allowed to belong to God. So all's not right with the world, even in our hearts. And so that's why the father there, the father of the boy, is really representing us, looking upon our human condition. We are powerless to really save humanity. We are powerless to do that. Oh, we keep trying, and usually we get ourselves more and more entangled in complexities and problems. So we say, yeah, we've got faith. But is it sort of that faith that gets us through when everything is going okay? And so we have to say along with the Father, Lord, help my unbelief. Help my lack of faith. And then Jesus commands the boy, the spirit, to go out of the boy. And what does the spirit do? The spirit has to obey, but not before showing his power. And so he throws the boy into convulsions again, and finally goes out, leaving him what seems like apparently for dead. And then Jesus takes him by the hand and raises him up. So, what does that tell us? What does that call to our mind? And I think what did it call to the listeners and readers of Mark's Gospel originally? They already knew that Jesus was going to suffer on the cross. That there would appear to be a triumph of the powers of evil. Not a defeat for the power of evil, but it seemed like a triumph. And yet in Jesus' resurrection, following the cross, the triumph over the power of evil was manifested, was shown. And so what Jesus is demonstrating here is that the redemption of humankind and our redemption comes about because Jesus embraces the evils that we are suffering and lifts us up out of it in his resurrection. Then what happens? Tomorrow we're going to hear and think about Jesus beginning to talk about his death his coming death and his resurrection. And the disciples do not want any part of it. What do they want? They say, oh, this can't happen to you. And by the way, who's the greatest in your kingdom? In other words, they were locked into a faithless self-interest. What can I get out of it? Jesus is talking about the cross. What can I get out of it is what we say. And so that's where we're going to see tomorrow where the rubber hits the road. Where where the words of God the Father to the disciples are very pertinent. This is my beloved Son. Listen to him. So we have in a nutshell here the work that Jesus came to do. And the challenge to us is, do we have the faith to join in that work, even if it's only by prayer? But it's only by prayer that that work can be done. Do we have the faith to open ourselves up to God in prayer and to say genuinely and truly, your will be done, even if it doesn't correspond to my will, even if it doesn't correspond to the way I think things should be? Do we have the faith to truly say, your will be done? If we do, that will transform the world.